Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's edition of the Geeking Out podcast. I am the Athletic Geek, and my guest this week is your Canadian hero, Mr. Sean Vincent. Sean, thank you so much for doing the show today.
Hey, my absolute pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
So, my first question for when I have a wrestler on the podcast is, were you a fan of pro wrestling growing up?
Absolutely. I started watching professional wrestling back in 1992. One of my absolute favorite wrestlers that had me hooked to watch was Jake the Snake Roberts. Him and his Snake Damien, every time they're on TV, even his promos, when you saw him on TV talking to an interviewer, it was like he was staring into your soul.
Mm-hmm.
Absolute fantastic. That's what actually had me hooked from the get go. And then it was just pretty much all from there, downhill. Huge fan.
So, Jake was your all-time favorite?
Absolutely. And then on top of that, after that, I was really big on Shawn Michaels, the boy toy, sexy boy. His matches with Bret Hart were astounding. His win at WrestleMania was actually one of my top, I would actually say the top match I love going back to and reliving on the
Awesome.
WWE Network.
Awesome. So, you heard it here, folks. Your Canadian hero is a Shawn Michaels fan. I finally have a Shawn Michaels fan and not a Bret Hart fan on the show. Yes, this is a win. um, okay, so you mentioned kind of the early '90s is when you started becoming a fan of pro wrestling. Um, how long until you started thinking about becoming a pro wrestler? Was that something that you know immediately when you saw it you wanted to be a pro wrestler, or was it something that kind of evolved over time?
Well, like all of us young kids, we wrestled in the backyard with our brothers and our sisters. My parents actually owned an aluminum swimming pool, and we would flip that sucker over, and me and my brothers would wrestle on top of that, and just backyard antics. And then it was the summer of 1998. I was 16 years old, and I was walking past a gas station that had a flyer hanging in it for a wrestling school for a renegade. Midwest Renegade Wrestling, MRW. And the school was out of Overland, Missouri. Immediately, I begged my parents to take me. The school was open Tuesdays and Thursday nights from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m., and I was always there. I was very blessed. My parents took me there, and I was learning from some of the top talent in St. Louis wrestling at the time. My first trainer was Ty Dalton, and then after him was several other trainers, notably today, like Mike Sharona, Makazi, Keith Smith.
Okay.
It just kind of snowballed from there.
Now, before you were, you mentioned being 16, starting training at 16. Were you an athletic kid growing up? Were you involved in things that would kind of lend itself to being a pro wrestler? Or was it just kind of jumping into the deep end with your pro wrestling training?
It was more like jumping into the shallow end head first.
Oh wow.
I was, I had absolutely no athletic training at all. I was easily 70 pounds, soaking wet, 5'8". Any other wrestling school probably would have kicked me to the curb and said, "Sorry, kid, there's no chance in hell that you'll make it in this business." But Ben Oliver, he was the owner of MRW. He never turned away anyone who wanted a shot at training to be a professional wrestler, and luckily, thankfully, he gave me that chance. And who knew? 22 years later, I'd still be at it.
So, I mean, you've pretty well seen quite the evolution of the independent scene. Starting back in 1998. What was the St. Louis independent scene like at that particular time?
Uh, I would say struggling. It was everybody. Well, pretty much like it's kind of like today. Anyone who can own a wrestling ring can have their own professional wrestling company. So it was many different independent wrestling feds all trying to fight to have their own uh, spotlight in the Midwest scene. And I was actually very fortunate to be a part of the company that really stole the spotlight, and that was Gateway Championship Wrestling, which that spawned from the closure of MRW.
Okay, I was just getting ready to ask you about Gateway Championship Wrestling. A little while back, I had Patrick Brandmeier on the show, and we talked about kind of the history of St. Louis. What was GCW like to you? And we got Patrick's perspective, having lived as a fan, but you were in the ring. A lot of people in the area still hold GCW with a great deal of reverence in the St. Louis area. What was special about GCW? What was GCW like? Tell me, as someone who unfortunately never got to live it, what was GCW like?
For me, it was family. It was home. It was, uh, um, I mean, I know the word brother and brotherhood gets tossed around so lightly these days, but it literally was that. Like, you had a group of guys who only wanted to put on the best product possible, and you want to talk about the hunger in the locker room. We all watched each other's matches, and we all tried to top that match before us, and it always made for fantastic cards, and the following was rival to ECW. You had fans that would follow GCW all over Missouri, and it was just a cult following that just still talked about to this day. I mean, we had stars born from Gateway Championship Wrestling. One big star is Matt Seidel.
Mm-hmm.
I remember the very first day Matt walked into the training center of GCW. He was scrawny. You could see his ribs, not an ounce of muscle on him, but he had one talent. He had a gymnastic background, and he caught on to professional wrestling so quick that you knew you had something there. And look at him now.
Oh
You know, he
yeah.
was Evan Bourne in WWE. He's now Matt Seidel in AEW. Then look at Delirious. I remember when Delirious first walked into. These are two guys I got to watch from the very beginning, take their first bumps in the ring. And now look at Delirious. He's the head trainer of ROH and head booker of ROH. You know, and then you got other names that have come up. I have been fortunate to have opportunities. I was not as successful as the two names that I've said, but the gentleman right there, if it speaks to anything that was Gateway Championship Wrestling, I mean, phenomenal. I guess if that's one word I could put on what was Gateway Championship Wrestling, phenomenal.
Um, so kind of citing the episode with Patrick, he said there was you mentioned ECW. He kind of mentioned ECW as well. There was a very a cult like almost atmosphere to GCW for someone like me who's from the area and didn't get to experience that, or for somebody who just not from the area. If you want to paint a picture of that cult, the GCW cult like atmosphere, how do you feel you could paint that picture for them?
Oh man, well, that's a really good question. Paint it, I would say, uh, yin and yang, black and white. Man, we had a mixture of everything. There, the thing about a good professional wrestling company is you don't have just one style of professional wrestling. We had lucha libre, we had hardcore, we had Greco-Roman, we had a mixture, we had brawling. Like, it didn't matter what kind of wrestling fan you were, you would find it at Gateway Championship Wrestling. I would say I would paint it as a diverse company.
Okay. Um, so GCW was your big foot in the door to just stardom in the professional wrestling business. It was. You mentioned you had some opportunities. Would you like to talk about what opportunities you've had and maybe some fun stories from those opportunities?
Yeah, absolutely. When Gateway Championship Wrestling folded in 2007, I was kind of a no man, and what I didn't know was that I was already well known amongst the indie scene, even though my home was Gateway Championship Wrestling. I didn't wrestle for any other company. Like, I barely. If I worked for another company, it was a friend of Ben Alvarez that I worked for as a favor, but GCW was my home company. Now, what I didn't know was word was getting around. There was this buzz about Sean Vincent being one of the top heels in the Midwest, and a guy named Henry Hubbard, a man who owned a company called International Championship Wrestling. He had contracts with Army bases all over the United States and overseas. And he would put on professional wrestling shows on Army bases using TNA and WWE talent. He had contracts with both companies. Well, he reached out to me. And one day I was at home, I got a phone call, and he goes, I would like to book you in Kansas City against Chaz Wesson. I'm just blown away. I'm like, okay, yes, sir, I'll be there. And the money was right, so damn sure I'll be there. I get there, we have a hell of a match, and Henry Hubbard's like, I want to book you. And it wasn't Chaz Wesson. He wanted to book this other guy named Cameron Cage as a tag team. And for 2 whole years, we traveled the entire United States. And not too many independent wrestlers can say this. We didn't pay a dime out of pocket. We were paid for our travel, our food. We were taken care of and paid for our work. And being early 20s and having that and working with WWE and TNA talent, that was phenomenal. And what sprung from that was an opportunity to have a dark match on SmackDown. I met Teddy Long through Henry Hubbard. Teddy Long was one of the bookers for SmackDown back in 2010, I believe, and I picked him up from the St. Louis airport going to Kansas City for a taping of SmackDown. It didn't pan out because at the time, and I think it's still a fact, WLW, or Harley Race's company, was the breeding ground for enhancement talent at the time.
Gotcha.
So on that Saturday, I get a phone call from Teddy saying, "Hey, Vincent, sorry, Harley's booked all the dark spots for tonight. But don't worry, the next time we're remotely near St. Louis, I'm going to call you. I got your information from Henry Hubbard, and I will get you your spot. You will be seen." And I'm like, all right, awesome. Not a month later, I have a falling out with Henry Hubbard, and guess what happens to my hookup with Teddy?
Went away.
It goes away. It went away. You know, in this wrestling business, man, one thing you gotta learn is it's not about what you do, it's who you know. You know, you could be the world's greatest, most talented professional wrestler, period. But if you don't know the right person or if you haven't shook the right hand, you're not gonna go anywhere.
Right.
And it's not to say I haven't talked to Teddy since then. It's just after that, other priorities kind of took over.
You mentioned the touring ICW schedule, and I was aware of ICW, but apparently, like you said, it went all over the United States, all over the world. What was the company like, other than just really taking care of the talent as far as expense and pay? Like, what was the locker room like? What were the shows like? What was ICW like?
Well, each show was different, man. We'd be in a different state every month, and with that came local talent you'd never met before. And when Cameron and I would enter the locker room, you're cordial. You're not gonna. How you handle yourself in the locker room is very important, as far as not being a dick. Let's be honest. So the locker rooms were always fine. I never had any issues with any locker room ever, with any show that ICW ever booked. So working for Henry Hubbard was a treat. He was absolutely professional in how he conducted himself. We had a falling out due to a disagreement with bookings, and it was a mutual split. There was no hard feelings. I don't think ICW is up and running to this date. I think he got out of the wrestling business a few years ago, if I'm not mistaken. If he's still up and running, good for him. If not, I think he got out of the business a few years back, which also good for him.
So, okay, you have a small falling out with ICW. GCW's closed. Where did you start making your mark after that? This is, 07's kind of where the quote unquote was in the middle of sort of the indie boom with like all the with Ring of Honor and CCW and Chikara, and there was a few places, in the St. Louis and Midwestern area. Where was Sean Vincent, playing his trade at?
Well, right after, so 2007 to 2010, I was with ICW, and right around 2010, I kind of took a little hiatus for a couple months, and my one of my original trainers coming up, Keith Smith, invited me to a local indie show called Southern Illinois Championship Wrestling, ran by Herb Simmons. And I show up, I'm sitting in the audience, and there's a rule that professional wrestlers always abide by, and that is never go to an indie show without your gear. So you always have your gear in the car, no matter what. I'm sitting in the audience, and out comes Keith Smith from the curtain, and he goes, "Hey, Vincent, come with me to the back." Now, I'm there with my wife, and I'm like, "Okay, hey, honey, I'll be right back." I go to the back, he goes, "Hey, man, someone didn't show up. Could you please fill in?" And I'm like, "Yeah, no problem." So I ended up working on the card. I think my first match for SICW was against Bobby D, and we had a knockout drag-out match. I'm not gonna have an ego and say that I can't have a bad match with anyone. Like, I can literally have a match with a broomstick and get it over. That's not me being egotistical. That's just me saying I can have a great match with anyone. And me and Bobby tore the house down that night. After the match, I shook Herb Simmons' hand. I thanked him for the opportunity, and I heard from him a week later. He's like, "I'd like to start booking you on the regular," and the rest was history. I've been with Southern Illinois Championship Wrestling ever since.
Awesome. What is SICW like? I've been to a few SICW shows. I think it's a fun promotion, but from a wrestler's perspective, how would you sell? Because I know quite a few people that listen to this don't live in the area. How would you describe it if they were passing through Swansea or East Carondelet and wanted to maybe check it out?
It's a family show. The one thing that separates us from all the other companies locally around that area is you can trust that when you buy a ticket, it's wrestling. Uh, think about old school wrestling at the Chase, Smoky Mountain Wrestling. Like, SICW is tradition. We at the same time, we'll also have a little bit of the mixture of today's wrestling. And when I say today's wrestling, you being an avid wrestling fan, I don't think I really have to go into that much compare and contrast. But there's a vastly different style of Smoky Mountain Wrestling versus AEW wrestling.
Right.
So you have a mixture of both, a healthy mixture. And on top of that, this is a show that's kid friendly. You're not going to hear people dropping F-bombs. You're not going to see provocative situations that you might have to explain to your 5-year-old later when you get home. This is a very family-run show, and it's been running for over 47 years. Herb Simmons is a man who literally did business with Sam Munchnick and Larry Matisick. Those are two names synonymous with St. Louis wrestling and the history of it. This is a man who's done business with Bruiser Brody himself. So when you look at the history of Southern Illinois Championship Wrestling and Herb Simmons, there is no other wrestling company locally that can hold a candle to that. So if you want to see a professional wrestling show that is of that great standard of wrestling at the Chase, you want to relive the history of the old Smoky Mountain Wrestling, that's what you'll get, that quality at Southern Illinois Championship Wrestling.
Awesome. Another thing I really wanted to ask you about, my first time actually getting to see you and meet you in person was at MMWA in the South Broadway Athletic Club. What's your memories of just wrestling in the South Broadway Athletic Club? It's a really, again, I can vouch for this one. It's a really cool venue to see wrestling in, and I'm hoping that all of my friends that I've made from all over the world through professional wrestling, one day I can take them to South Broadway. But what are your memories of South Broadway?
Right off the back, Tony Costa. Tony Costa was a fantastic businessman. He was always fair, kind, uh, and when I say fair, I means he always said what he was going to do, and he said what he meant. If you did a good job, he told you did a good job. If you did a terrible job, oh, trust me, you knew you did a terrible job. Um, he ran it, his company, just as well. Tony Costa and Herb Simmons were best friends, and they both had the same business mindset. So that was the honor of working for Tony Costa and MWA, was just the history of the company. Um, the guys in the locker room, the workers, all again class acts. There was never a bad egg in the roster. And then the fans, talk about loyal fans. You can't get any more loyal than MMWA fans. They're there every single show, and they pack the house. And they're ravenous. I've worked that venue both as a heel and a face, and they're very, very interactive, and that's a crowd that you love to work in front of because you feel like you give them your money's worth every time.
Another promoter that I know you work for is Burt Prentice in USA Championship Wrestling. I've had a lot of people on the podcast that have done business with Burt. All of them have a lot of great things to say about Burt. What do you have to say? What is USA Championship Wrestling like? And do you think kind of the reputation that Burt kind of has is maybe a little unfair?
No, not unfair at all. How can you say unfair to a man who's everything he has, everything he's built, he built off the sweat of his brow.
I'm not saying no. I don't even mean it that way. I mean it like so many people. There's a lot of wrestlers that have a lot of like negative things to say about Burt, and he's kind of a polarizing figure. But everybody I've talked to, Otis Crowley, so many other wrestlers, anybody who has had on the show have great things to say about Burt. And do you think that the reputation of him being the negative reputation that a lot of people carry about Burt, do you think that's unfair?
Well, first off, I gotta say I've never heard anything negative about him. And if someone has a negative opinion about Burt, then that's their opinion, and they're entitled to it. For me, working for Burt personally, my first time was last weekend. I was in Jackson, Tennessee. I was there for a show on Saturday at the Ulman Arena, and then I stayed over for their TV show on Sunday, their TV tapings on Sunday. And let me tell you something right now. Out of the 22 years I've been in this business, I have never, outside of Herb Simmons, worked for a man that had such a tight ship where everything was precise and he had a story for everything. Every match had a reason. And the talent he booked was the talent that made you go, or at least to myself, okay, can't be lazy tonight. Nope. There's a lot of good talent in this locker room tonight, and that's even the enhancement talent was good. Burt in and of himself, and then I got a chance to talk to Jerry the King Lawler. He was on the card with me, and he had nothing but wonderful things to say about Burt, and he's done business with Burt, and that's coming from the man himself, Jerry the King Lawler. So
right.
When you have the respect from guys like the King. Again, I don't know, if you have something bad to say about Burt, you have problems with yourself and your own insecurities. That's the way I look at it.
Fair enough. Yeah, I just always. Some people have some things to say about him, but everybody I've ever talked to says that Burt's a great dude. So I mean,
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's. Yeah, and I've never met Burt, but everybody I've talked to says he's great.
You're missing out, man. If you get an opportunity, he will be October the 30th, our show for SICW. Burt Prentice will be there at the Belle Claire Fairgrounds for our big spectacular show. He's a great man to talk to. He's usually at the merchandise stand selling his mystery boxes. He's easily approachable. Just walk up to him, and he loves to have a conversation with anybody.
Okay, so that's something to look forward to in October. For me personally as a fan, and for anybody who might be listening. So Very interesting. Before we start recording, you mentioned that you are actually on your way to the ACE Training Center, and you're going to do some work there. But you also are, for those that don't know, the ACE Training Center is the training academy of Bob Orton. What's Bob Orton like, and what's your just got any good Bob Orton stories?
Oh yeah, for sure. Well, first off, me and Bob have known each other. I met Bob back in GCW. He was booked on a card um, at a ice hockey arena, I believe, somewhere in Missouri. I did. Memory's a little foggy, but I do remember the first time I met him. He was super friendly, shook my hand, and he goes, "Oh yeah." Well, I'm not going to try to mimic his voice. I'd be doing him an injustice. He goes, "Oh yeah, Sean Vincent. Oh yeah, Ben told me all about you, man. Yeah, good stuff, good stuff." I'm like, "Oh, thank you." And that was a day that his son Randy was there in the back, and that was before he was signed
Nope.
to the WWE full time. He was still developmental talent, and from there, that was easily 16 years ago.
Oh
Um,
wow.
so fast forward, I'm sitting at a SIC. Yeah, thank you. I'm sitting at an SICW show with Herb, and I'm like, SICW really needs a school. We need a school, like some not only for our roster to train and bump, but I am coming to that point in my career where I need to have a next step, and I've always wanted to own a wrestling school. And I had in the back of my mind the idea of asking Cowboy Bob Orton, my buddy, like, hey, what's he doing these days besides every other weekend traveling? What's he doing during the week? Probably nothing. So Herb's like, you have nothing to lose but to ask him. So I call Bob up and I'm like, I shoot him the idea about running a school with his name attached to it. And he was all for it. And so me and Bob Orton opened up the Ace Wrestling Academy together. It opened in 2018. It was open for a good year before the pandemic shut us down. And let's see here, July 31st, we're actually having an open day tryout at the East Cronley Community Center in East Cronley, Illinois. It's free. Already we have about 13. That's a terrible number, but we have about 13 people showing up for that. And then August the 3rd will be the first opening day or the reopening of the Ace Academy.
Okay, that's awesome. I'm glad you guys are able to get back at it after the pandemic.
Yeah,
So we kind of skipped ahead and jumped around a little bit, but kind of going back to GCW,
sure.
you know, everybody remembers GCW with quite a bit of fond memories, and it seemed like a really happening promotion. Uh, to your comfort level, what what made it that what went wrong to make GCW have to close when, for all intents and purposes, it seemed like the quote unquote indie boom was just around the corner?
Uh, it was a mixture of things. Ben Oliver was the owner and operator of GCW, and you could just tell, like over the last 2 years, Gateway was open. He was getting burnt out. The one thing I've learned from Gateway Championship Wrestling is this: you cannot book a show, be the booker, be the promoter, and be a wrestler, a worker rather, on your card and not go insane from all the stress. And that's exactly what was going on with him. It ended up coming down to burnout and finances. We were doing one show was getting us to the next show, which was getting us to the next show. And Ben just finally said, you know what? Uh, it's time to hang up the GCW banner and go into the sunset. And that's just basically what happened.
You've you've had a quite the career. You've been to a lot of places, still going strong. What are some of your favorite matches and memories and angles you've done throughout the course of your career?
Oh yeah, sure. Well, one that comes to mind. The first angle, the big angle, was in GCW where I kind of took a page from Andy Kaufman. where I was a heel. I was over huge as a heel, and I was telling the wrestling world, I can't believe there are female professional wrestlers. Like, what a joke. This is a male profession. There's no room for women. And I had a knockout, drag out feud with Daisy Hayes and Mischief that lasted almost a whole year, and had this giant payoff at an adult show that to this day is still talked about, which is really, really awesome. SICW, working for Herb Simmons, I had the pleasure of working the likes of Cowboy Bob Orton. I had a match with him, Dory Funk, and then the really cool one was I had the opportunity to work Wes Briscoe, which is the son of Joe Briscoe.
Oh, what's
We
Wes like?
A class act, my man. He's the son of Gerald Briscoe, so you couldn't expect anything less. In the locker room, just a cool cat. In the match, totally safe, easy to work. And then afterwards, talk about a guy you just want to hang out with 24/7. Just an all-around good dude.
Okay, that's awesome. Um, Another thing, and I had this on my notes, but I kind of glossed over it because I got sidetracked talking about ICW. But your Canadian hero, who came up with that? And you've obviously never renounced your citizenship to Canada, despite the many changes in your character. How did you come up with that? Growing up here in the Midwest.
Right. So just like any other wrestling fan. Well, the one thing that people don't honestly know, because I never really talked about it, was I was born in Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada.
Oh,
My
really?
parents, yeah, my parents moved from Winnipeg when I was one and a half. It was 1983, 84 that my father's factory. He worked at a box factory in Manitoba, and it shut down. And my mom was from St. Louis,
Okay.
so she had family there, and they were really on the point of being homeless. So they moved to St. Louis to live with my mother's family, and my dad got a job here. He got his citizenship and whatnot, and yeah. So when I got into professional wrestling, and they asked me, "Well, do you want to be from St. Louis?" I immediately said, "No, I want to be from Winnipeg, Manitoba. That's where I was born. That's where I was born." And yeah, that's the thing. I never really like a podcast here or there, but a lot of people don't know that I'm actually Canadian, which is really, really funny.
Now it just makes the fact that you're a Shawn Michaels fan even like sweeter for me, knowing
Yeah.
that knowing that ladies and gentlemen, we have a legit Canadian that was
Yeah.
happy when Shawn Michaels defeated Bret Hart at WrestleMania 12. This is the best. I love this.
Oh yeah, trust me. I get teased about that all the time. Like, you are such a hypocrite. I'm like, yeah, whatever.
So you've done so much in the area. You've mentioned getting to see the likes of Matt Seidel, Delirious come up, getting to work with people like Wes Briscoe, getting to work with some independent legends like Mischief and Daisy Hayes. You're beginning to enter the next phase of your career with your training school. Is there still anything you that's still out there that you really want to accomplish? Is there still like a goal for the next 5 years that you're hungry for?
So the long run, so SICW, we have a lot of pots on the stove, on the burner, as they say, and I'm not going to try to reveal anything, spoil anything, but a lot of big things are coming for SICW. That's one is TV. Hannibal TV on YouTube
Yeah.
is going to be. He's already going to be showing our TV tapings that we're going to be doing, and we're going to be working out a deal with possibly I'm just gonna leave this right here because I think I'm gonna spoil something I shouldn't be saying.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair. That's totally fair. Um, oop.
And I'm big King's coming, maybe CW, and then Ace Academy. I'm really looking forward to having that up and running. And I think a long-term goal for me is to have the next big breakout star come from the Ace Academy. That's anybody's hope and dream of owning a wrestling school. You want to say that kid right there that's in WrestleMania was at my school. So I
Absolutely.
think that right there is always something to shoot for.
Um, you own your own school. You're a professional wrestling trainer. Since I have listeners that li- kind of listen and view my channel for the not the wrestling content, but for the comic book and other content that I have on my channel, if you were to describe pro wrestling training to them, how would you describe it to a non-fan?
One of the toughest challenges you'll probably ever face ever. People think about professional wrestling and they have this preconceived idea that anyone can do it. It is not. I've seen heavyweight uh, uh, muscle lifting guys come into a wrestling gym and they can't handle it. I've seen athletes of all caliber from wrestling, collegiate wrestling, from martial arts, and it's really a shock to their system when they realize what you have to do and what it takes to be a professional wrestler. The one thing that is absolute, you have to have heart and you have to have dedication. One thing that I see that is very hard to find in a person wanting to be a professional wrestler. You can't just train on the training days that the school is open and you're in a professional wrestling ring. To be a professional wrestler, you have got to live it 24/7. You've got to train like an athlete. You have to eat like an athlete. You have to look like an athlete. You go to some of these professional wrestling companies locally around Illinois and Missouri, and I swear to God, half the roster looks like they just picked them out of a crowd, or an all-you-eat buffet. It's no one looks like an athlete anymore, and pot kettle black coming from me because I got a little bit of a dad bod myself. But the one thing that separates me from them is I have custom gear. My all I don't wear anything but custom in the ring. And when you see someone who what I call wears a Walmart outfit in the wrestling ring, it's a joke. You're pretending you're going half ass, and you can't do that if you want to make it in this business. If you want to make it in this business, you want to be taken seriously, you got to put in the work. And that's not just professional wrestling, that's any sport. That's football, that's baseball, hockey, basketball. You got to go at it 100%.
What has been the most rewarding thing about owning the school so far?
Uh, seeing young talent and being nostalgic towards it. Like every time I see a greenhorn get in the ring and take that first back bump, I immediately it echoes back. I took my first back bump. You know that the look on their face, like, and then the wind that they're sucking afterwards because they knocked the wind out. Yeah, I remember. Every Thursday night, it's like you remember that. Well, that's a rewarding thing. Like Tuesday and Thursday night, the school's open from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. At the East Carolina Community Center in East Carolina, Illinois. And I'm sorry, am I plugging it right there? Yeah, I totally am. I always look forward to those nights because it's like peering into the future of professional wrestling. It's really nice.
um, Last question, because I know you got stuff to do, but we're coming out of a pandemic. We have SICW, we have MMWA. Uh, there's St. Louis Anarchy. There's WrestleMax. There's Glory Pro. There's a lot of great wrestling groups and talents coming to St. Louis. Where do you see the future of St. Louis Pro Wrestling?
I've said this once, and I'll say it till the day that I am 6 feet underground. What's good for one is good for all of us. Whenever there's a new company that pops up, be it WrestleMax or Glory Pro or whoever, I wish them nothing but the best and success, because if they're putting on a great product, that means they're bringing in new wrestling fans, which means those wrestling fans have an opportunity to possibly see an SICW show. So I wish them all the luck. I see potential, but at the same time, it's really sad that if you own a wrestling ring, you can put on a wrestling show in Illinois. And there's plenty of companies, I'm not going to throw anybody in the bus, that I would be happy if they closed the doors and called it quits tomorrow, because the less crappy products out there, the less opportunity to have fans have that first independent wrestling show where they're turned off from professional wrestling forever because it was a crappy product they went and saw. So I would hope that in the future there's a little more regulations when it comes to who can put on a show in Illinois, but I don't see that happening anytime soon.
Okay. Well, I've really enjoyed this conversation. I hope to get to see you again. Really missed those MMWA days where I got to see you, and hopefully get to see you in person again. But I really appreciate you taking the time to do this. And if there's somebody who hasn't seen Sean Vincent before and like to find you on social media, do you have any for the public?
Yeah, absolutely. There's actually many ways you can see me. I'm on Instagram, Sean Vincent 1998. I'm on Facebook, Sean Vincent. And also, for all you GCW fans out there, there's actually a GCW nostalgic page on YouTube called GCW Tribute, where I've taken the entire GCW library and I've given it to you, the fans, the public. I'm slowly uploading every single show that GCW ever had on YouTube, and you can go back, rewind, and relive the glory days of Gateway Championship Wrestling today on YouTube. Every month, I'm always uploading new content. So go on there, go on YouTube and check it out. And then also, July 24th is the next big show for Southern Illinois Championship Wrestling at the East Cronlet Community Center at East Cronlet, Illinois. And it is free. This is free admission for the public. This is our way of saying, welcome back from the pandemic. We missed your faces, and we're going to give you a hell of a show. And then that very next day, that Sunday, we're going to be doing the very first TV taping for SICW. And if you came to this show on July 24th, you got a free seat at that TV taping the very next day.
Awesome. So definitely check that out if you're in the area. Or if you're not in the area and you're passing through, come on out and check out SICW. Check out Sean Vincent. Check out all of St. Louis wrestling. It's a golden age right now. And I appreciate Sean for being on here, and I appreciate y'all for listening. Definitely check out the GCW shows. I know I am. And check him out on social media. And if you enjoyed this podcast, please give it a like, share, subscribe for more content. Not just from the world of pro wrestling, but from the world of comic books, gaming, anime, and all things geek culture. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.